All right, this is Lizzie Kose. We're going to go ahead and get started. Kay Eichler is joining us. She is out of the room at the moment, but we are having a very busy morning, and a special thanks to all of the ladies who are still downstairs in the Claiborne building listening to the webinar after the collaborative we just had this morning. Glad you guys were able to stick around, and thank you for ensuring that you could be here today. I really appreciate it. So today for our Get Ready webinar, we are moving on from Blueprint Talk for a little bit and talking about a coalition. Now, we will be revisiting Blueprint Talks. Just about every webinar will probably touch on it, but the focus of today's webinar will be on the coalition. So we're going to do a few reminders. As always, we'll answer some questions from the previous webinar. We're going to do an overview of what a coalition is and how it could help your community. And we're really excited. We have a guest from Advocacy and Communication Solutions today, whose name is Rebecca Cohen, who will be sharing about coalition. We're going to talk about your coalition-related assignment, and we'll touch back on Blueprint, the last thing that we've asked you to do, and talk about next steps. Go ahead and get started. So just as a reminder, we want you to be sure you can actively participate in every weekly webinar. If you've gotten an email from us saying that we didn't see you on the webinar, that is because we are taking note of whose name we see under the participant list. And we have to, because this is tied to funding, we have to make sure that you're engaged every week. And if you're unable to do so, we'll reach out to you and ask you to watch the recording. But please try and make it a priority to be here in person so that you can share and get the most out of the experience. We also ask that if anything comes up that you let us know ahead of time if possible, if you can't be present for a webinar, or let us know if you're sending someone in your place. That's really appreciated. Thank you. Just wanted to give you the remaining timelines. We are not quite halfway through, but we've made some progress. I wanted to remind you that we will not have a webinar the week of Thanksgiving, of course, and then we'll also have a bit of a break in December around Christmas time, but these are the remaining webinar dates. Just be sure you check your calendar, make sure you can be present, or send someone in your place for all these upcoming dates. All right, so questions from last week. 19 of you took the survey at the end of our webinar last week, and the first question we asked was, on a scale from 1 to 5, how confident do you feel you can create a blueprint by early February? And we were really pleased to see that the majority of folks feel on a scale from 4 or 5s that you guys really think that this is possible. We heard some good feedback saying that that you like the way we're setting up these small steps you can take to eventually attain that final draft of a blueprint. It looks like a couple of you are still uncertain and in that middle range, not sure if this can get done by early February. And we understand this is a lot of work on top of your very busy plates. So if there's anything we can do to support you, to help you feel more confident or to help you move in that direction, let us know. So one question we received and that we've repeatedly received is, what are some ways others are using their $25,000 for their Get Ready money? And I thought that this would be a really good opportunity to use the chat box so that we can hear about what some other folks are planning to do with that funding. So if you're pretty certain, or even if you haven't really made a final decision, if you could type in the chat box and share with the group what some of your ideas about how to spend your $25,000, that would be great. So I'm going to pause for just a moment here. Okay, so glad to hear from Pam. She says they're meeting with a consultant today, and other than that, they'll continue to determine. That consultant could help you figure out what the best use of your funds is as well. Website, coalition support. Stacy's awarding mini grants to childcares as incentives to their teachers for performance. Looks like Mary in Ascension is working to do some PD with childcare teachers on Saturdays. Branding, website update, professional development, high quality curriculum and coaching. These are all really great ideas. Anybody else who wants to share what they're doing with their $25,000? Feel free to type in the chat box and we can return to it. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so someone shared this question. My network does not have any birth to 3 seats. They have pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 and all Head Start. A great focus of this work is on birth to 3, but with no daycares in my district, do I still need to make a birth to 3 goal? Ready to learn is a goal for early childhood. So this is a tricky situation, and this is why we think that Ready Start work, or even just blueprint, creating that blueprint is so important, because each of our networks are so wildly different. And this network is in a particularly unique situation. There's no daycares in that area. So we just ask that you think, if this is the case for you, we want you to think about how are those birth to 3 children being served? Where are they being served? So they have to be somewhere. So start thinking about, are they being served in a type 1 or 2 center? Are they being served in a family child care provider? Are parents just keeping their kids at home? And think about critically how you can support those kids to be ready for kindergarten, even if they are not in a type 3 center or a school setting or Head Start. So think about, is there a type 1 or 2 center that could consider converting to type 3? Would your Head Start partner be willing to explore possible solutions to this problem? Could some seats be converted to early Head Start seats? Can you reach out and partner with family child care providers? If the majority of the kids are just staying at home with their parents or relatives, how can we support those parents? How can we help those kids, even though they're not in a classroom with a teacher, get ready for kindergarten? And are there any municipalities in your area willing to explore possible solutions with you? So this is a very difficult situation, but it is one in which there are lots of different options for you to approach it and try and think creatively and strategically about how we can help prepare all the kids in your community to move forward with kindergarten. Okay. So I have a question that if they are served at home, how can we support those that are served at home? There are possibly certain home visiting programs that could help parents, and you can connect those parents with those services. Kay, do you have any other ideas?
I would say you would first want to start with finding out who those are, where they are, how many, and then perhaps connect with them for some kind of needs assessment. What do they need or want?
That's a great question.
And so that would be a place to start, and that's enough for this get ready.
Yeah. I mean, you could get a group of them together and have a focus group of sorts to figure out what supports do they think they need. Good point. Great question. All right, so now we're going to dive into the coalition overview. So just as a reminder, I know you've seen this slide many a time before, but we have 4 pillars that we believe are the foundation for our Ready Start Network work: blueprint, coalition, governance, and fundraising. And what's really been interesting as these 4 pillars emerged, when we started this work in January, we did not necessarily have these 4 lined up, but as our cohort 1 and cohort 2 members started becoming engaged and doing the work, we realized these just emerged on their own kind of. And we realized that all of these tie together, but all of these are necessary to have a successful Ready Start network. So you'll find, as we start talking about coalition, Blueprint is really tied into coalition, and they really lean heavily on each other. So with that being said, we actually have Rebecca from Advocacy and Communication Solutions, or ACS for short. I'm going to unmute her from just a moment. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about Ready Start Networks and how they have expanded their coalition and why that's important.
Great, thank you, Lizzie. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Rebecca Cohen. I am Vice President at Advocacy and Communication Solutions. We have been working in early, I just want to just mention really quickly, we've been working in early childhood in the company for 15 plus years. I'm located in Michigan, but we have been working with the state of Louisiana with early childhood for just about a year now, and specifically with Ready Start Networks for, well, since last spring. So we sort of understand where you are, and our expertise and some of the work that we've been doing has been around coalition building, community engagement, and communication. So as we walk through a couple of these slides here, and we're really going to focus on the coalition building, as Lizzie set up for you all. Just keep in mind, we are very well aware that all of the Ready Start networks and all of your community networks are slightly different, and so there are going to be some nuances here, and we're going to talk a little bit about what some of those nuances might be and some of the choices you might make about when it comes to building your coalition that's going to work for you. So the first slide, as you can see, we just wanted to put out there what is a coalition. And even when we talk about Ready Start Networks, we say that Ready Start Networks are a coalition of individuals. And you're committed to creating and implementing a bold local vision for early childhood. So that language, that common language around Ready Start Networks, it was really important that we put in here that it's a coalition. And really, as you think about, coalition is just about the people who are going to help you achieve your goals. Those goals, Lizzie said, the coalition is very much linked to your blueprint, very much linked to your funding, and it's a part of your structure as well. So just as you keep in mind, I just wanted to plug that as you think about building your coalition, there's some common language that we're using around the Ready Start that we developed with the state. So as you do outreach and you begin outreach, you create presentations and materials, you write letters or emails to people. I believe that language is available to you, and I would really encourage you to lean on that language, because the more people who are using this common language to describe Ready Start Networks and what we're trying to do here in early childhood in Louisiana, the more people are going to get it. We know that people have to hear the same message over and over and over again to really understand what it means. So even before you, even before you determine who's going to be part of your coalition, you want to figure out what you want your coalition to do. And this will help you also then figure out how to organize it. When we were working with Ready Start Networks across the state, most Ready Start Networks have a group of core partners. So they're the early childhood people they're going to help you implement the plan. And then you have another group of people. These are your unlikely allies, the people that are out in the community that you need to leverage. They need to be the spokespeople to help you achieve what you're trying to achieve in your blueprint. So you may have, depending on what you call this group, some people call it an advisory group, some people call it a council. But you may have 20 people on this kind of advisory group, and then you might have a whole bunch of others that will have other roles. But some of the functions that are on the screen right here, I'm not going to read them to you, but some of these functions here are of these advisory groups. And so even before you think about who you want to serve in this role in your coalition as an advisory group or council, you will want to figure out what you want them to do. And this will distinguish them from your core group or your community partner group, who may be more on the implementation side. So just for the sake of organization, we always also encourage you all to name what you want to call this group. So some Ready Start networks are calling it their advisory council, some are calling it an advisory committee, others are calling it something completely different. But the thing that's really we want you to remember is it's important for this group to understand and know what the expectations are of them in advance so that they can commit to them. So it's really important for you to think through what you want this group to do first. You can see on this list we have, it's support, promote awareness, encourage others in the community, be a thought partner, so somebody you can kind of lean on, and advocate on behalf of the network. These are really good spokesperson's roles. All right, Lizzie, if you could advance the slide. Thank you. So once you identify what you want the group to do, then you can figure out who are the best people for the job. And the mix of who those people are might look a little bit different depending on your parish. There are going to be differences whether you're working in a very rural parish versus one that is a bit more urban or one that has a big mix. But what we do know is that every one of your parishes has assets in them. They just might look a little bit different. And there are advantages, there are benefits, there are challenges, whether you are a very rural area or not. And so it's just about finding the right mix of people. So we would recommend to aim for about 15 or 20 people, and making sure that they're representative across the entire parish. So even if you don't have childcare in a town up in the northeast corner of the parish, but you still may want to include, say, a principal or somebody there's a school there, a principal or some other community partner to reach the families that are up there, even if they don't have childcare. You also want to think about having a mix of school-based folks, community or healthcare organizations that serve family, government, and business. You can see the list that's on here. These are the types of organizations that you'll want to consider. You'll have a handout for your homework that has these categories on them. And it's just important to always go back to what you want these folks to do. So if you want them to leverage different government funding, or think about new solutions for creating more access, these are the people you're going to want on this advisory committee. Also, it's just as important just ask yourself the question, is there anyone in the future who may create problems or barriers if they're not brought in early? So I always like to flip that on its head. You want the people that are going to help you achieve your goals, but is there anyone else who, if they're left out of the situation, that they're really going to cause problems later? Maybe they're not on your advisory committee, maybe it's just additional outreach, but just thinking through that. Okay, Lizzie, next slide. We wanted to give you some examples of some of the Ready Start networks who they're engaging. They're engaging a variety of stakeholders. And so also given your organization structure, whether you're at a school district or your nonprofit, or maybe your community action agency, you already know a lot of people in your community. That being said, there may be people that you don't know yet, and that's okay as well. It's about using your networks and your partners' networks to figure out who the right people are. So at least for these beginning stages as you're brainstorming, it's okay to, it's more important to get a representative sample of your parish rather than, oh, I don't know that person yet, so I don't want to include them. So you want to get the right people, and we can figure out how to do the outreach to get them on board. So you can see here, there's a few examples on the page. I just wanted to mention a couple other examples. In Morehouse Parish, they're looking at there's a health coalition, Kids First Health Coalition, and they are looking at including some of those leaders to help. They know they need to help connect to families, and they're thinking the healthcare providers there could help share information to some families. So and they want to make sure that some of the healthcare providers in their parish are aware of what's going on in early childhood realm, and so they're figuring out who those leaders are that those healthcare providers look to, and including them on their advisory council. There's also looking at food banks, libraries. Richland Parish is going to include their sheriff. So even thinking about local government in a different way, there's other pots of money that as we start digging into who knows where some of this other funding is that can support early childhood. Libraries often have money that they could use for early childhood that could be leveraged. Large businesses in the parish that some of which may have corporate foundations. They may not, but some do. Looking at the chamber president. So thinking through all of these different categories, no matter what parish you live in, you have these assets in your community that are built in, that are reaching families, that are and community leadership. All right, Lizzie, next slide. So this nice colorful graphic here, this is part of of ACS's network mapping tool. And so as you are thinking through the different individuals in your community that can bring different skills or contributions to your network, you can use this. If this is helpful, this is one framework you can use. We divided it up into 4 concentric circles. You have your core, your primary, secondary, and tertiary. I like charts and grids, so I like to put it into if I think about my core and who those people might be, they might be my program partners. And then the next line is I think about what role they would help me play. They would help me implement. They may make some decisions about my blueprint, help me come up with what that blueprint looks like. My primary circle, here, this is where your advisory council folks come in. So these are going to be your spokespeople. They may attend events. They're going to help you leverage funding, identify funding. They're going to come up with some new ideas. They're going to help you reach out to city council. They may increase awareness by writing a letter to the editor of the local paper, putting things out in their organization's newsletters. And then you get into the secondary group. So these people may not be as central to the implementation of your blueprint, but these may be groups like a healthcare coalition or a chamber group that has an early childhood focus. And you could potentially work with them on specific aspects of your blueprint. You may not need to engage them on a very regular basis, but it's probably a good idea to know what each other's doing since you have some mutually supportive goals. And then your tertiary circle here are those that are directed by or not affected by your work, but those who you may want to reach out to and make sure they know what's going on. So this could be the media. It could be your state representatives at the state house. So again, not as involved to help create the blueprint, but good to make sure they know what's going on. In fact, actually, some of the Ready Start networks we've worked with have talked about or thought about including state representatives on their advisory committee. Not exactly sure where they landed there, but again, it could look very different depending on your parish, what your relationships are, and how active some folks are in your community. So again, the takeaway here is that when you're network mapping, what we call this, and you're in your homework assignment, you want to identify, think about the broad categories, then think about the types of organizations, or it might even be individuals. At the end of the day, you want to get to those 15 to 20 individuals. It's more important right now. You might have a list of 50, and then you can narrow it down, and that's okay. You also want to think about the right level of person. You could engage an organization like even within the school district. You could engage the superintendent, might be on your advisory committee. But when you need something that's more concrete or tangible, like some data information, you might engage a data specialist to help you with that data in a work group meeting. But for your advisory group, you really want to think about who are those leaders, so that when you bring them together, they're all sort of at that right level. They're able to make decisions for their organizations. And again, just a reminder to make sure that they're really representative of your parish. And it's okay if you don't know them right now. Again, you're asking your network, your program partners if they do, and that's all about the right outreach to them after that. So this is just step one in identifying them. Lizzie, do you want to move to the next one? Okay, Lizzie, do you want me to go through this, or did you want to go through this one?
I'll go through it, Rebecca, and then if there's anything else, since you are so intimately familiar with this tool, if there's anything you want to add after I go through it, then by all means, you can jump in. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And I'm also happy to answer any questions of anybody.
Great.
From
so
anybody.
If you have any questions for Rebecca, please type it in the chat box. And while I start talking about what we want you to do, type it there, and we'll answer it in just a moment. So the big takeaway that we want you guys to to leave when this webinar is done is that as a Get Ready cohort, we're not asking or requiring that you begin to build a coalition or have an advisory council. That is work that is for our Ready Starts. So what we want you to really take away here is that we want you to just begin to think about who or what in your community could be helpful and could be on your team as you're trying to fulfill the goals that are in your blueprint. So answering the question, who should be engaged, or who could we bring to the table that might be helpful? That's really what we're asking you to do right now. Nothing particularly formal at this moment. We really just want you to think critically about your community, and you might have to do a little bit of digging to uncover what are some organizations in your area? Are there any foundations? What about nonprofits or philanthropies? Could you engage the library system? That sort of thing. So we just want you to start thinking critically and looking closer, kind of a little bit under a magnifying glass at your community as to who you could bring to the table to help with this. So like Rebecca said, they have a network mapping tool, ACS does, and we are so happy to use that tool. It's very, very helpful. And most of our Ready Start networks have used it and gotten a lot out of it. So what we want you to do is to look at this network mapping tool and complete the first column. So I'm going to open it up and show you what it looks like. So this column we're talking about is this one right here, where it says who should be engaged. I'm gonna blow it up a little bit so you guys can see it. Okay, so this network mapping tool breaks down different categories, including local, state, federal government partners, nonprofit partners, for-profit partners, business community, all of those different categories that we were referring to, or that Rebecca was referring to earlier. That is who we want you to think about engaging and how they can help you. So actually, when I say how they can help you, you can think about that, but right now, really all we want is brainstorming as to who should be engaged, this column right here. So I'm going to email this to everybody, and it is also available in the Google Drive folder. But what we want you to do is think about each category in your specific community and think about who should be engaged. And remember, I'm going to point back to the slide that Rebecca went over earlier, which is different people in your community can help you in very different ways. There are some, like possibly Head Start leadership, school system leadership. There are some that are core. They're going to help you a lot. They're going to be your right-hand man. And there are others who could help you with milder things or with various other projects. So what we're really asking you to do is just answer the question, who should be or could be engaged in our community network? So this might entail a little bit of Googling or brainstorming or talking to people to see, are there some organizations in your community that maybe you weren't aware of that you'd like to potentially engage in the future, to let them know, first of all, why early childhood is important, and to get them on your team to help support you in the work that you're doing. So I'm looking at the chat box and it says, someone asked, what services could ACS provide to our network? So I'm gonna let Rebecca answer that question. Just so you know, Rebecca and her team at ACS, we at the LDOE contracted with them to help with our first Ready Start networks, and they're continuing to do some work with our second cohort of Ready Start networks, but I will let her take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. So we're always happy to have a conversation with folks about what we can provide and what you need. We want to make sure whatever support we provide is really what you need when you need it. So as Lizzie said, for the first cohort, there was monthly support phone calls, and then for the second cohort, we're facilitating some meetings with stakeholders and doing that kind of support. But a lot of what we've been doing is having conversations either on the phone or in person, and to help walk through, create some of this work, create some of the action planning around the blueprint. So again, we are happy to have a conversation. It could really look different depending on what your needs are. And I know that's not probably answering your question, but again, we'd be happy to have a conversation, and knowing that you're in the get ready stage, what the best timing of that might look like for you, I think is really important.
Great, thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate you joining us today. So does anyone have any questions about this network mapping activity? If you'd like to speak, I can unmute you, or you can type into the chat box. If you have any questions, please let us know. We're going to move on for now. I don't see any. Okay, I do see a question. Who do we schedule a one-on-one conversation? I'm assuming you mean with someone from ACS. If you would like to reach out to Rebecca and Lori. Email me and Kay, and we will make the introduction.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then there's a question from Nicole.
Yes.
Can you explain more about for-profit partners? So I assume this is sort of like, how are they different from businesses? Because those are for-profits also. So what we mean here, we separated these out. In some communities, there are they could be trade schools. They could be for-profit. Could be actually centers. This tool and these categories. I wanted to also just provide you with this context. We use this not just for early childhood. So a lot of the examples that I gave were early childhood related. You may not necessarily have anyone in that category of for-profit partners. So I should have mentioned that. This is more of a general tool that we've used. I do think that you'll have, you also see you'll see on the tool, there's a category for grassroots and grass tops. Frankly, we haven't used those categories as much as the others. I would just really focus on the businesses, but there may be a partner that doesn't fit in that category. So it's just really about figuring out who the folks are in your communities that make the most sense. And then Crystal asked the question, if there's already a coalition what if there's already a coalition in the community? Okay, so that's a great question, and it looks like it also functions as the R&R. So I think this is, let me just read your question here.
Rebecca.
Yeah, go ahead, Kay.
So the point I want this group to understand is we are not at the department thinking of a coalition as a separate group. It's not a separate structure that you overlay into your community network. It is merely assembling the right people. So many of you, you should think of your network as an existing coalition. And you are now expanding your coalition and pulling in different people. And Christy, you have a unique situation, you're right, where you have a group that's literally, that's their name, the Early Childhood Coalition. So I can see how that can lead to confusion. And we can talk with you about that specific situation. Because what you're going to need to do is decide in Point Coupee how you work with that group. If you proceed to be a Ready Start network. But for everyone else, what you need to think about is who can you bring on board, and that is the homework that you have. Lizzie gave you the structure just to think about who else in your community you can bring on board, and they'll have different roles, and we're going to think about that with you later. But the first step is who might be involved, and then we'll dive deeper into what they might do for you. Christy,
if I could just add,
go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, if I could just add, I think Kay makes a great point that figuring out what you want the group to do, and then figuring out who they are, and then if there's another group, if there's a difference in that, figuring out how are they really the same, and are they or how do the groups get combined? How do the groups work together? I think there was another person here who said that they also have a council for the early childhood community that can function as a coalition. Remember, so some of the other early childhood councils, they depending on the community, they may not have the same goals. They may not have the same kind of functions. They may. So again, it's figuring out who all needs to be involved, what role you want them to play, and then go from there. figuring out what the strategy is, if they get absorbed, if they get, if you can have some kind of influence over that group, or whether they are just working in tandem, like in Morehouse with the Kids First Coalition and the Morehouse Coalition. Both early childhood, one is focused more on health, but they are also working on literacy, and they're trying to figure out right now, how do they work together? And they have some very similar members. Some of them are exact same members. And how are they working together without overloading the community on having too many meetings? And that's just something to kind of work through. And it's going to look a little bit different in each community.
Okay, great. These are all really great questions. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you, Rebecca, for helping us answer some of those. And again, if you are in need of kind of diving in a little deeper, I encourage you to email me and Kay so that we can have we can set up a phone call and we can talk a little bit more about this with you. So it doesn't look like anybody has any questions about the network mapping tool. I think Rebecca hit on this, but I do want to emphasize that we're just doing the column who should be engaged. And there might be, you might not fill in all 3 responses or the blanks, like there's 5 blanks in this very first box. We're not requiring that you fill in all of these. We just want you to think critically and do a little bit of digging into what your community already has to offer, and who could be engaged in the early childhood sphere. All right, so I'm going to shift just a little bit now that we've properly dived into Coalition, and talk a little bit about the blueprint work that we've discussed the past few weeks. First, I want to talk about Coalition and how does blueprint play a role. So your blueprint, as you know, is establishing this plan for your community's early childhood work. It's communicating what you want to be true for your community in early childhood. And it can be used as a guide to determine who needs to be at the table. So using that blueprint and thinking about the goals you want to achieve, you can think about, well, who in the community could I tap into that could help me solve this problem or achieve this goal? And on the flip side, it can also be used as a recruiting tool. So once you do get a blueprint in place, you can use it and share it with people and say, hey, look at this plan we have, look at what our vision is for our early childhood in our community. You really should be on board and you should support us. So the blueprint, like we've said so many times, it really lays the foundation for the direction that your community takes in early childhood. And I feel like it really walks hand in hand with coalition building. So if you were to bring more people to the table to help you be a thought partner, help you achieve your goals, that blueprint really lays the direction down for that. So it is critical to communicate those goals to external stakeholders, potential funders. This is an idea, it gives the idea of where the organization is going to help garner buy-in and even potential funding down the line. So to build your coalition, you'll need to identify the necessary participants to achieve your blueprint and consider carefully who needs to be informed, invested, involved, and or held accountable. So who needs to be at the table to help bring your blueprint to life. So you guys have been working on your analysis of the current state. We've asked you to look at your data to really help you understand the strengths and shortcomings in your community. We've asked you to include critical background information that external stakeholders would need to read to better understand what's going on in your community network, what your needs are. So this is what you guys are currently working on. And we asked that you share a draft with us by November 22nd, which is next Friday. I'm sure it is the Friday before a lot of you are on Thanksgiving break. If you would like to submit it to us earlier, if you've got a draft, by all means, please feel free to do so if you have a draft earlier than that. just remember that it's just one, maybe two paragraphs that answers these questions. How many sites do you have by type? How many children are you serving? In the past 3 years, have there been any major increases or declines in numbers? Class scores information, strengths, weaknesses, etc. So just keep in mind that someone might be reading this who's really not involved with the early childhood work, and so it shouldn't have all of the data in details ever, but it should have a good balance so that you give them a clear picture of what's going on without overloading them with too much information. So you got to hit the highlights, and you got to be very clear as to what the weaknesses are as well. So last week I emailed this data mapping tool, and it's also in the Google Drive folder. This is optional, but this is something that maybe if you bring other partners to the table, they can, you can have them engage with your data in this way. It's just a way to start thinking, looking at numbers first of all, but also thinking of prompting questions that, that might help drive your blueprint work. So with that being said, I think a lot of people have started this process. A lot of people I know have engaged with their data kits that have been shared. Some of you have brought partners to the table to help look at that data. What has the process looked like for you? Has anyone used the optional data mapping tool we shared, and was it helpful? Basically, we just want to hear how this has been going so far, and hear any unique ideas about how you guys have approached this. So I'm going to allow you to either unmute yourself if you want to talk, or type it in the chat box.
Hey, Diane, so your question about whether if a site has closed, if the data should be included, that's going to depend on certain circumstances. Sometimes sites close and the children are assimilated into other sites. And so if that's the case here, if you're looking at numbers of children served and numbers of staff, then you should definitely include that data there. You certainly would not include it or count it as a site that's active.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want to talk that through further, you can send me an email with the best time to call you, and we'll get to it.
Right. So it looks like a couple of people have started working with this. Cato viewed the data and verbally identified areas to provide in the paragraph, 1 to 2 paragraph portion. That's fantastic. And she said later on that the optional data mapping was helpful. So that's really good. I'm glad to hear that. Nicole said they have used the data mapping tool. They're preparing for a collaboration meeting this Friday. They'll have handouts for each participant with the data from the network. That's a great idea. Really is going to get some buy-in from your network partners. Michelle's going to use the tool next week at their leadership team meeting. Fantastic. See, Nicole says, as a group, we will answer the questions. What did you notice about the data? What questions do you have? And what recommendations do you have for growth or improvement? All really great questions. Sounds like going to be a really productive meeting. Let's see, Mary from Ascension said she met with Head Start and special ed leaders to look at the data, and they found areas where they need to grow. They've started working on that current analysis of the state.
And so something else like, and if you want help from me doing this, Lizzie or I would be glad to help you. you can actually take the components of that data tool and do a look back on where you were in 15, 16, and compare that to where you are now. That would give you some kind of sense of which direction you're moving in with various components of the data. And that might also help you when you get ready to set goals.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Monica shared they've sat down with elementary folks and looked at all the data. They're really trying to get kindergarten classes on board with class, and they shared the data, hoping they can bridge this gap.
And that's right, Monica. It's good that you are linking to kindergarten, because of course, certainly that's our goal, is to have children ready for kindergarten. So you're making that connection with your kindergarten teachers, and everyone kind of looks at the data as a community, and that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, agreed. Wow, so there's so many people who have shared, and we're really, really glad that the process has begun. A lot of you guys have looked at the data, and it hasn't just been you on your own. I heard Lola say that the network partners and district leaders brought out ideas that she did not see. That's fantastic. That's why you got to bring other people to the room sometimes to help them really take a good look at what you've got in the situation that you're in. So anyways, we're so thankful for all of you for sharing. Sounds like there's so many good discussions and conversations happening. And just keep in mind, if you have any questions about your data, or if you feel like you're missing something, or you want to talk it through, Kay and I are always here to help. Fantastic. It sounds like a lot of people are having luncheons or get-togethers or meetings with program partners to talk about this, and that's fantastic. We're really happy to hear it. So your next steps, we are wrapping up this webinar, and related to the blueprint you're creating, we'd like you to submit your analysis of current state to the department. That would be me and Kay by Friday, November 22nd. Remember, this is just a draft, and we hope to give you feedback on it as well. So let us know if you have any questions related to that. We also, before next week, we would like you to work on that column of the network mapping tool. I, as always, am going to send a follow-up email this afternoon with details. I'm going to attach that tool here. And please title your document with your network name in it so that it's easy for me to save and to find it. So I'm a little worried. It is a PDF that you can type into. I'm a little worried that some people's computers it might not work properly on. And if that is the case, feel free to just type this into a Word document. Whatever works easiest for you. Just be sure if you type it into a Word document, maybe title all of the different groups so that I know what group you're referring to or what person you're referring to based on all the different categories. But just be sure that in the document that you send me, your name is in it, so it's easy for me to find and differentiate. We ask that you send it by Tuesday of next week. That way, I'll have sufficient time to look over everybody's submissions by that afternoon and prepare for the Wednesday webinar. And also remember, next Wednesday, we will have a webinar looking at Coalition again, but then the following Wednesday is the day before Thanksgiving, and we will be taking off. So I hope you guys all really enjoy that time off. Lastly, as always, we are asking that you take a recap survey. So I am going to copy and paste the link here into the chat box. But if you want, you can find it at tinyurl.com/getreadyWebinarForm. So I see a question from Nicole that says, for the ReadyCert networks, what is the funding allocation? Is it based on a set amount or number of classrooms like lead agency funding? As of right now, no, it is not. It is purely based on are you a Ready Start Network or not, and if so, they are receiving $100,000 based on that Ready Start Network designation. And that's what we plan on doing for the 2020-2021 school year as well. So thank you guys so much again for your time today. A special thank you to Rebecca for assisting us in talking about coalition building today. Please fill out this recap survey and ask any lingering questions you might have there. Nicole also says, do Ready Start Networks also get lead agency allocations?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. All right, thank you all so much. I'm gonna sign off now, and I will be emailing you later this afternoon to recap all that we've talked about and all your next steps. So as always, let me know if you have any questions. Take care and have a good afternoon.